Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Richard Kroll and Mark Weaver. And Richie is coming to you again in this COVID-19 world via Skype. How are you, Richie?
Marcus, I'm starting to like this coronavirus a little bit because it keeps me more than 6 feet away from you on a regular basis.
About 5 miles to be exact, right? I think that's about where you live.
We're about 5 miles apart, yes.
And you definitely like it better this way. It's a much better commute, and you don't have to put up with my ugly mug.
Well, it's not that you're ugly. It's just you're really annoying in person.
Well, and on text. I'm annoying on text, too.
More so on text. You've infuriated more friends of ours on text than anybody I know.
What are friends? I don't prescribe to that. I don't really cultivate friends like you do.
No need to. There's no need.
Well, Richie, as always, we start with some words of wisdom for you, for our listeners. What is your tip of the day?
I got two little ones.
Okay. We've heard that about you. You have two little ones.
Well, that's another story for another time. When you're stuck in the house, as frequently and persistently as we have been, you start to figure out little tricks of the world. So I have two little time-saving and accident-saving tricks. One is in the food category. So when you get this happened to me like a month ago. We got some takeout sushi, and I had a bottle of soy sauce. And you just want a little bit of soy sauce, right? But
sure.
when I poured it out, like 8 ounces came out. It was a disaster. So when you get a new container of liquid that you only want to pour a little bit out of, instead of when it's brand new, taking that styrofoam kind of plastic topping thing off that shows it wasn't opened, and you peel that off.
Right.
Don't peel it off. Take a fork or the tip of a sharp knife and just jab a couple holes in that plastic and leave the plastic on, and it comes out perfectly.
Are you sure your wife didn't loosen the cap to trick you and have you pour soy sauce all over the sushi?
Well, she could have. If she didn't, my daughter definitely did. The second tip is people are doing more home projects, right? They're painting, right? Maybe they're going to paint the bathroom or their basement wall or their garage wall they've been waiting to for years. And it's always when you dip your paintbrush and you take the excess paint off, and when you scrape it on the side of the paint, then the paint goes around the rim and then it drips out. And then when you put the lid on, it causes a big problem. Instead of doing that, take a large rubber band, put it around the circumference of the paint can over the middle of the opening, and then when you dip it in, use the rubber band to take the excess paint off, and then nothing collects in the circular top.
Wow, that is so handy. I had an idea for on a related subject. I had an idea for an invention. I called it the painter's papoose. And if you ever paint a lot, it's always a pain holding the can and going back to it and whatever, especially with trim work and stuff. Imagine a little tray or even multiple trays with different paint in it that kind of went around your waist, and you could just dip it in, and it would be on a swivel. So if you bent over, it would swivel and stay level and not spill out. What do you think about that idea?
I think it's a tremendous idea. I'm a little nervous. This is a PG-13 show, and you're talking about holding the can and dipping it in. So let's be careful there.
Well, Richie, those were very practical tips of the day. You're showing a lot of value with these tips, by the way. You've only had 81 shows we've done. You've only had a couple of clunkers, but
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, before we get into the rest of the show, I want to thank our loyal patrons, specifically Mark Zlotnikov, Eric Weaver, George Muldoon, Mike Smalls, Chris Barbie, Scott Carney, Alvaro Puga, Larry Helms, and you, whoever's out there listening. Please consider going to our website, areweidiots.com, under supporting listeners tab. There is a tab to go to our Patreon page. And again, low budget here, guys. Platinum sponsorship, $15 a month. Gold, $10 a month. Silver, $8 a month. And bronze, only $5 a month. As we joked before, that's probably only a few sheets of toilet paper in these times. So you can afford a few sheets of toilet paper to help out our show. Don't you think, Richie? It's not too much to ask.
No, especially with the new unemployment checks and people getting raises, they should be able to afford that.
All right, so on our show today, we're really excited about this. We have our Idiots of the Week, which we always do, and we'll get through those fairly quickly. But first, we want to welcome our guest, John Brazier, to the show. John is Director of Fun and Games for the Philadelphia Phillies. And John, hopefully you can hear us okay. He's also coming to you over Skype. But John, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it. And
Yeah,
I don't think you guys are idiots, especially after hearing those tips from Troller.
And I got to say, for me, John, I like to call him Johnny B or Brage, is a local celebrity. I mean, we go way back. Gosh, I've probably known Brage now 30 years, introduced through the local lacrosse group of friends that I have, and also University of Virginia fellow grads that went to school with Brage. So it's an honor to have you on and looking forward to it.
Well, again, right back at you. Can't wait. Let's get started.
All right, so Rich usually goes first, John, with the Idiot of the Week nominees. So he'll read his, then you can go second, and then I'll bring up the rear with mine. So Richie, Idiot of the Week, lay your nominee on us.
Having owned a condo down outside of Tampa in St. Pete Beach for a decade and no longer owning it, I became a little bit of a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. Raymond James Stadium is such an awesome place to see a game. They have the pirate ship in the one end zone, and they have a lot of partying going on in that end zone and all sorts of. They shoot stuff out of a cannon. It's really fun. So with Tom Brady and Gronk going to Tampa, I got to admit I'm interested in to see how this plays out. Now, however, Tom Brady's transition to Tampa has been a bit of an adventurous one early on. So if you probably heard, he was caught working out in a playground, a public playground that was closed to the public. And a police officer or somebody said, "Yo, Tom, we can't wait to see you in a uniform, but you can't practice or work out here." And then the mayor kind of got on him a little bit like, "Hey, we love you, Tom, but you can't, everyone's got to follow the rules," right? But then a couple days later, he accidentally walked into a stranger's house. He's renting, I think he's renting Jeter's house down there while he's moving to Tampa, and he walked into a neighbor's house by accident, and he walked in like he owned the place, and
wasn't he dropping off something? He thought it was one of his coaches, right? Wasn't he supposed to drop off a playbook or something like that? I think
so he was meant to visit the Bucks offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich, but he went into the neighbor's house, and the neighbor said, "I literally was just sitting here and I watched this tall guy walk into the house. He didn't even look at me. He just dropped his duffel bags on the floor and kind of looked at me like, 'Are you ready?' And you should have seen the look on his face when he realized he was in the wrong house." Now, here's where this gets a little dicey, other than, trespassing. The neighbor, David Kramer, didn't really care. But some of the teams in the NFL are wondering if he's breaking the rules. Obviously, Brady has a history of being accused of breaking the rules, like Deflategate, some other things. But
no. George, our patron George Muldoon will not appreciate that, Richie.
He won't care now that he's a Buck, but he would have defended him vociferously if he was a Patriot. But during lockdown, players are prohibited from using team facilities or in-person off-season instruction, conditioning, and workouts. So if he was just there to pick up a playbook, why was he dropping off 2 monster duffel bags? So this is going to have a little.
Sounds like an investigation. We need an investigation.
What I guess it'll be called Duffelgate.
So the idiot is Tom Brady, I guess? Is that
correct?
Okay, Tom Brady.
The idiot is Tom Brady.
Whenever a Patriot or ex-Patriot is nominated as an idiot, I'm always on board. So, all right, Brage, what is your nominee for Idiot of the Week to add to this lunacy?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can top the Tom Brady, but as you all know, the coronavirus pandemic has changed the way that everyone is working. Obviously, a lot of people working from home, including newscasters, musicians, A-list celebrities. You're seeing a lot of these Zoom calls. When you watch the news, you're seeing a lot of these reporters being at home. You saw Cuomo, I guess the CNN Cuomo, Chris Cuomo, was working from his basement while he was quarantining. Right. Well, today, this happened this morning, ABC correspondent Will Reeve, he got a little too comfortable working from home on this morning on Good Morning America. He did a report. Now, his report was all about reporting on pharmacies that are using drones to deliver medicine during the pandemic. And he delivered the report to Michael Strahan, Amy Robach, and he had a suit jacket, he had a dress shirt, but guess what? He had no pants. And everybody saw, the social media people, everyone could see that he wasn't wearing pants because obviously he's not at I'm sure this happens at studios all the time. But that was my dog.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm sure the studios, are basically make sure there's somebody, a producer, that's saying, make sure you sit a little lower on the chair. Well, he's at home. His producer is probably his wife, and again, he was not wearing pants. He was caught, and so there you have it. I'm nominating Will Reeve, ABC correspondent, without wearing pants, from an interview at home.
That's a great safety tip, Rage, to make sure at all times people wear pants.
You'd think he'd do
that too. Like a lot of these Zoom calls that people are doing, you're seeing people aren't used to this. And I don't know if you guys saw the one where, there's about 30 employees on this Zoom call, and this guy was literally naked, not realizing there was a video. He thought it was all just audio, and all the coworkers were laughing, and the guy didn't realize that he's buck naked, drinking coffee while doing a work call.
Oh my goodness, that's career limiting there.
Yes.
That was a good nominee, Brage. I got one, Richie. As you know, we're all going to be asked to wear face masks for a pretty long time, I think, going forward out in public. And in Michigan, they already started that. A Michigan state senator is now apologizing for wearing a face mask for what appeared to be a Confederate flag pattern. State Senator Dale Zorn, a Republican, apologized in a pair of Twitter posts Saturday for the face mask that he wore on the Michigan Senate floor on Friday. I'm sorry for my choice of pattern on my face mask that I wore yesterday on the Senate floor. I did not intend to offend anyone. And then he goes on to not apologize. Zorn, in an interview with CNN, said his wife made the face mask for him and was not a Confederate flag. He said that even if it were a Confederate flag, it represents represents a part of history we should be teaching about and the atrocities that happened during that time, so it doesn't happen again. So basically, he was saying, well, it wasn't a Confederate flag, but even if it was, I should be wearing it to teach about the atrocities. No, that's not the way it works, Senator. That's my nominee, Richie.
Wow. So, Tom Brady clearly just made a mistake. But if he was cheating, trying to get a head start on the season, again, we can't prove that. But if it's proven he was cheating, then, I would have nominated him as the winner this week. Brage is a great one. I saw another one, a corporate conference call, and when the same kind of situation, a woman was on the corporate conference call and her husband walked right by her in his tighty whities. So this is going on. People aren't used to it. I did a meeting once in my pajamas. So that would have beat Brady. But here's why I'm going to give your senator the winner this week, because he had an easy out to say that It wasn't actually a Confederate flag. My wife made it for me, and she's confirmed it was just some pattern. But for him to come back and say that the Confederate flag is okay to promote, where it represents, oppression and slavery and, racism. Yeah, okay, we should be teaching about that, but you don't put yourself back in the hole. He just dug himself a further hole, which is idiotic. So
yeah, and his other face mask is a Nazi symbol, right? A swastika.
Yeah, and he's got one that's a middle finger, and he's got one that
because we got to teach about it. So we got to wear it to teach about it.
Exactly. So
what an idiot.
Are you going to send him $1?
I will.
Great.
All right, so Richie, we want to talk with Brage now, and again, as we introduced him, he's got a great job, director of fun and games for the Phillies, which I'm dying to find out how you got that title, Brage. But I'll turn it over to Richie. Richie, why don't you start with just telling the story how you guys got together and how you got the idea to have him on the show.
So Brage and I have kept in touch over the years. And then we get together every year with the lacrosse guys, Paul French, Scott Gabrielson, Chris Flynn, that whole crowd. And Brage joined us. We do it every year at Christmas time at the Bagataway Tavern in Conshohocken. And we just started talking, and Brage was talking about his Phillies podcast. And I was like, hey, I got a podcast, not as famous as yours or with the level of guests that you've had, but geez, I'd love to have you on ours. I think you have a very interesting history with the Phillies and a lot of great stories. And Brage's like, yeah, let's do it. So I'll open with this question, Brage. I think you've been with the Phillies for about 25 years. How the heck did you get this job?
Well, this is my 27th season. So I was I'll take you back. As you mentioned, I went to the University of Virginia. When I was in college, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I was a liberal arts major, and I figured my dad was in sales, my brother was in sales, my mom was in marketing. My game plan was I was going to, I'd be a liberal arts major, and it was actually, believe it or not, religious studies and history minor. So it was religious studies major, history minor. I figured I was going to go into sales, corporate sales.
You weren't going to become a pastor?
No, I just, I was actually in an interdisciplinary major, political and social thought, and I had to take a lot of philosophy, religion, history. And then I decided to get out of that. I wasn't happy with that major, but I had taken a lot of religion courses and history courses. So I think the major and minor kind of found me. But anyway, again, my thought was going to be working in sales, getting out of college. I got a job offer I played club lacrosse at UVA, played high school at Harvard School, and I did a lot of coaching, and I was playing at a high level club, and I got a job offer to play and coach in Manchester, England, right out of college. So there's 10 Americans that go there, 7 go to Manchester, 3 go to London. So I did that. I lived there for a year, which is basically prolonging my immaturity. And then I came back to the States, and I was trying to resuscitate a relationship with a girl down in D.C. Well, she wasn't very happy. I went to England, so that broke up pretty quickly. And I started interviewing companies, got a job with Aetna. So I sold employee benefits for Aetna for 3 years in Baltimore, and then I got a job as a consultant in Washington D.C. for 2 years for a company called Johnson & Higgins. So now I'm 6 years out of college, 1 in England, 5 in the insurance industry. It's the summer of 1993. Phillies are on their way to the World Series, though I guess they didn't know it at the time. I went to a college, but a good friend of mine's wedding, Leslie Gillen. Her brother was a high school lacrosse star and played at UVA, great lacrosse player. But Leslie and I were good friends. Her brother-in-law was the vice president of marketing for the Phillies, and little did I know he was looking to hire somebody to be the marketing spokesperson for the team, somebody to go around to radio stations, TV stations, and get free publicity for the team. I didn't know this at the time, but I hit it off with this guy because he just had fun stories about Dalton and Dykstra, and he was someone I just kept gravitating towards. Finally, he asked me, if I had any sports marketing experience, And I was the bartender had overserved me at this point at the wedding, and I said yes.
Surprise.
Yeah, and I said yes before I knew what my. He said, so what's your experience? I said, I marketed the sport of lacrosse throughout the country of England. He said, what does that mean? So instead of just saying, well, I just played and coached, I dug down a little deeper and I said, I did a lot of branding, PR, marketing. He said, John, what exactly did you do over there? And I said, fine. I played lacrosse and I coached lacrosse, but I did go on a radio station one time in England, which is basically PR, marketing, and branding. So I'm not BSing that much. And little did I know he was looking to hire a BSer basically to represent the Phillies. And I had the just enough sports experience where he said, you know what? I mean, he's looking at me like the wheel is spinning, but the hamster's dead. But he said, I got to hire this guy. And 3 months later, or 4 months later, he hired me and I started, I guess, working in February of '94.
So, Brage, is the lesson to the youth of our country to BS your way into good jobs?
Well, I don't know if it was an embellishment, definitely. But I guess it's knowing your audience. It's also, it's more, you always hear that it's not what you know, who you know. But I guess it would be, I wasn't smart enough to figure out that there's a guy who works in sports and, hey, this would be a great opportunity. I just fell into the conversation. But I think for young people, you should try to figure out what you want to do and work your connections to get to that person that can help you out and follow your dream. That's the 27-year lesson that I got is you can work in something that you love doing, in which I've been fortunate enough for, again, this is my 27th season, that I don't consider it a job. I consider it something, a passion that I go to the ballpark every day when it's not coronavirus. But yeah, it's finding your dream and then finding out how to take advantage and work your dream.
I love it, Brage. I just got a little excited. I'm doing jumping jacks now.
There was a precedent for that, Richie. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt that he said when asked if you can do something, say yes, and then go figure out how to do it. So yeah, it's not too far off from that.
I'm learning. I'm a little late in my career to make a change, but you never know. So, Brage, the director of fun and games is an interesting title. Who came up with the title, and what are your main responsibilities during the course of a year?
Well, my title when I first got hired in 1994 was, I think, manager of promotions. So everyone thought I was in charge of the giveaways. I wasn't in charge of the giveaways. We had somebody that would, basically contact the vendors and come up with the hat giveaway or the Fanatic birthday giveaway. It was my job to promote that. So I was going into these radio stations with the suit on. I was still in kind of corporate America in my mind. And I was going into these radio stations in a full suit. The radio station guys, I don't know if you've ever been you've been in studios. The DJs are wearing flip-flops and shorts and Hawaiian shirts, and they could be wearing a bathrobe in there. They're the worst dressers in the history of any industry.
Maybe even no pants.
Maybe even no pants. So I'd go in there, and and they'd ask me all these questions. What's your title? Are you in charge of promotions? Why are you wearing a suit? And I went back after the first couple of interviews, and I went to my boss and said, I got to have it. My title is totally misdirecting people, and it's like I can't even get. It takes half the interview to explain what I do as opposed to what I'm trying to promote. So he said, all right, let's come up with a fun one for the radio station. What would be a good title? So we literally sat at a baseball game and started thinking of titles. We're like, Vice President Shenanigans. And I said, that's too much responsibility on the vice president's end. I like the shenanigans. But he said, what about manager of tomfoolery? I'm like, I think I need a little higher elevation than the manager, but something not too high, not too low, right? Something in the middle. He said, director. I'm like, right, we're just going to stay on the director. He's like, tomfoolery, shenanigans, hijinks. What do you think? I said, I don't know. What about director of fun and games? That's kind of what I guess that's kind of what I do. He's like, all right, let's do it. So he didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody from the office. I went up to the lady who made business cards. I've been there for like 2 weeks. I went up to the lady who makes business cards and said, by the way, I ran out of cards. She said, okay. And she starts typing. And what's your title again? And I said, director of fun and games. She typed it, looked at me. I said, really? I said, yeah. So didn't tell anybody else. Didn't even tell my boss, I don't think. And next thing you know, like 2 weeks later, I get these cards that come in, formal cards that say director of fun and games. And I guess the rest is history.
I love it. Now, you've had the opportunity quite often to hang out with a lot of celebrities, whether it's at the ballpark, in radio stations, whatever the case may be. What are some of your most famous, I guess, two parts, who are some of the most famous people you've hung out with tightly, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 hours? And, what are some of the funnier stories?
Yeah, so I think my first year was pretty cool. Alice Cooper came to the game. And I think he was in town for doing a radio station interview. He's a big sports fan, a huge golfer, but he came to the game. And one of the things that the Phillies, we get a handful of people at lunchtime to go at the vet, and we'd go on the warning track. We'd have this guy, Mage McDonald, who was a former coach of the Phillies, and he would hit a fungo bat to us as we're running along the warning track, and he'd hit it perfectly so it's against the wall. So you'd have to make a leaping catch against the wall. You'd throw it, then the next guy would run, and he'd do you cover the whole warning track back and forth. And that was our lunch hour. So Alice Cooper, I met Alice Cooper, we're hanging out, and he said, now, John, what's the coolest part of your job? And I was thinking about it. I said, you know what? And I told him that story, that at lunchtime we go out there and shag balls, and the guy hits a fungo bat to us. And all of a sudden he goes, and I told him some other parts of the job. And Alice Cooper said to me, man, you got a cool job. And it didn't register until I was driving home, and I've got Alice Cooper in my head saying, man, you got a cool job. So that was my first year. So I realized it was going to be kind of fun from that point on. Some of the really, there's so many people, which is kind of the coolest part of my job, is you get to work with, politicians, actors, rock stars, all kinds of people. So probably one of the cooler ones is Raul Ibanez was new to the team. And Raul Ibanez came up to me and he said, hey, John, because I was always the guy that kind of came to when there were celebrities to bring people in and kind of host them. And he said, John, I've got a friend of mine. He's coming into the game tomorrow night, and I got him a ticket. He's just come by himself. And I'm going to leave him at the window, but I was wondering if you could just kind of meet him outside and bring him in and kind of show him around, give him a little tour. I said, yeah, no problem. I said, just give him my name or give me his name and give me his contact info, and I'll follow up. He's like, all right, I'll give you his name. His name is Eddie Vedder. He's in a band called Pearl Jam. And I'm looking at him like, is he messing with me? And they were really good friends because, Raul played in Seattle, and that's where they recorded that's where they're basically based. So I met Eddie Vedder. Now, Pearl Jam wasn't on tour. So he looks like a regular guy. He's wearing shorts, baseball hat. He's got, he's my size, not very big. And I bring him in. The guy couldn't have been a cooler guy. I spent the whole game with him. And we walked all over the ballpark. There was maybe once or twice where somebody recognized him because, again, he looked like a regular guy with a baseball hat, and Pearl Jam wasn't in concert. And, again, couldn't have been a cooler guy. And the Pearl Jam came back during the World Series when we played the Yankees in 2009. So, but there's a lot of them. We've had the whole, Dave Matthews Band sat in the suite. I've got to know Art Garfunkel really well because Art has sang the national anthem a bunch of times. He's a Phillies fan, even though he grew up in Queens. And actually one time down in spring training, he was going to perform down in Clearwater at the Capitol Theater, and he wanted to go to a game that day. So we were playing on a road game in Dunedin, which is one town over. So it was literally just me and Art Garfunkel, and T-Mac, Tom McCarthy, was sitting behind us. And the whole game, he was asking me questions about baseball. And because he was asking me inside questions about the team, I got to ask, I'm a huge music fan, as Kroller knows. I got to ask him all kinds of, I got so much great information out of Art Garfunkel. It was the best.
My guess is Art probably likes the Phillies better than he likes Paul Simon.
Well, and it's funny you said that because the one question he asked, he said, John, what's your favorite Simon & Garfunkel song? So I wasn't thinking clearly because I clearly should have said a song that Art Garfunkel, I don't know.
Mrs. Robinson or something, right?
Bridge Over Troubled Water, something that he's focused clearly on the song. And I tried to somehow show him my answer was going to be something that would show him that I'm a huge Simon & Garfunkel fan. And when I was in college, I listened to that album, Bridge Over Troubled Water, a lot. And one of the songs on there was The Only Living Boy in New York. So I told him that. Well, he just gave me a nod. Well, after the next day, I was talking to a coworker who's a huge Simon & Garfunkel fan, and I told him that story. He said, you did not pick that song, did you? I said, yes. Right. He said, that could be the worst song he could ever pick. I said, why? He said, well, Paul Simon they were writing that album, 1968. A director who did The Graduate was also doing Catch-22. So he had Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon in the middle of making the album, had him come down to Mexico to film to see if they could be part of this catch-22. Paul Simon gets cut. Art Garfunkel makes it and is gone for 6 months. So Paul has to go back to New York. He's kind of pissed off that he got cut. He's pissed off that he doesn't have his partner to record anything with on this new album. And he's basically alone. He's the only living boy in New York.
Right.
So he wrote the song about Art Garfunkel being stuck in Mexico. And of course, dummy me has to bring that song up as his favorite one.
I do love that song, but I did know that backstory too. So yeah, and that is a good song. But it was when Art was not around.
Yeah, you could have nominated me for Idiot of the Week that following week.
So Brage, I guess now you read music lyrics and kind of try to understand the meaning.
Yeah, but it is cool. Like, I don't know if you follow Amos Lee is a great musician. He's from Philadelphia. He's played the Man, played Red Rocks. He's a big Phillies fan. He's come to a lot of the games. There's a local band, Dr. Dog, who's had the Fanatic on the stage to perform. I've got to know that band really well. So it is cool. You get to know a lot of the, bands that come through, whether it's, I could go on and on. It's Meatloaf and, whatever. I could go on and on. It's great.
Now, what about, wasn't there, when the old lovable Veteran Stadium closed down, I know all the football and baseball players were happy because that was the worst turf in the league and probably the worst locker rooms. But when that closed down, wasn't there a big auction you were a part of?
Yeah, so the last year, the ballpark, we had a huge auction where we're auctioning off everything, whether it's, part of the wall, part of the turf. There's a wall in the down near the where the ground crew hung out, where they had every celebrity that came into the ground crew room, which is right off home plate, would sign the wall. Well, they took parts of that wall off and auctioned it off, and just seats and just every little memorabilia you could find from the vet. So at the time, there was a show called Cold Pizza, which was on ESPN2. It was a morning show.
Yep.
And they heard about. We sent a press release out, and they wanted somebody to come on there to talk about the auction and talk about some of the memories of the vet. So I was chosen to go up there. So I went up to New York by myself. And I didn't know what to expect. I did my homework, and I'm a huge Eagles fan anyway, so I already had in my head what the big memories from the Eagles point of view and the Phillies point of view. So and also I had all the auction stuff that I was ready to go. Well, I go up to Cold Pizza and I get into the studio. They put me in the green room. Well, in the green room, it's literally just me and Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is in there to sell a book. So Gene looks at me as if like I'm a celebrity, if I'm going to go on Cold Pizza, assuming I'm a celebrity. And he's like, so what do you do? And so I'm like, I'm John Brage. I work for the Phillies. I'm going on there to talk about the vet. He's a big baseball fan. He starts talking. We're talking like for a long time. And finally, they come in to get me like, John, we need you. I'm like, all right, Gene. All right, man. Good talking to you, buddy. So yeah, strange things you encounter.
Now, have you ever, you're a good guy and smart about not taking advantage of relationships, but have any of these celebrity encounters led to follow-ups, or you actually befriending any of these guys?
I mean, I don't know about friends. I mean, again, Amos Lee, I contact him a lot. I've got to know Miles Teller, who's an actor. He's been in a lot of movies. He's going to be, if you haven't seen any of his movies, he's going to be basically Goose's son in the Top Gun 2, which was supposed to come out this summer, but because of the coronavirus, it's going to come out in December. But he's going to explode on the scene. He's from Downingtown originally, and he's a huge Phillies fan. He comes a lot of games. But his name's Miles Teller. He's been in a bunch. Look him up. You probably notice him. He texts me all the time. I had the saxophonist, sax player from Dave Matthews Band. I mean, just a bunch of different ones. So I stayed in touch with Art Garfunkel in case we need to get him back, sing the national anthem. So.
Now, is Teller any relation to Penn and Teller?
I don't think so. But we've had Bradley Cooper. I don't stay in touch with him, but we had Bradley Cooper several times at the ballpark. With one time right after The Hangover, he came with Renee Zellweger, who he was dating at the time, and he had Zach Galifianakis, who's just as funny in person as not in person. And the funny thing is too, Kroller and Mark, is whenever we have a celebrity, Larry Anderson and I, Larry, our broadcaster, we have this mind game where if somebody tells me something away from Larry, or someone tells Larry something that we have a way of reading each other's minds. So we mess with every celebrity we bring in, because I always bring in part of the tours. I'll bring up into the broadcast room where T-Mac and Kruk and Fransky and LA, they'll meet. It's a given thing. They'll meet the celebrity, and then I'll go out of the room, or LA will go out of the room, and we'll totally blow their mind. We've had Uncle Junior, we had Senator Toomey, we've had every draft pick of the Sixers, John Dornbos, who does magic himself. So it's been pretty funny.
That's pretty cool. Now, there's one other famous story I remember. You doing a rollerblade race against your brother Dollar Bill. What was that all about?
All right. So do you remember the X Games that were on TV?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So back at the vet, we were trying to spice things up, and the X Games were pretty big. So we decided in a meeting that let's do it's almost like one of those live Septibus games that you see up on the Jumbotron or the Fanavision, right? We're gonna have two interns, one guy dressed in a blue uniform, one guy dressed in a red uniform. They get to the bottom of the upper deck, so basically the concrete of the 500 level, right below the 500 level. And Dan Baker would, in between innings, Dan Baker would say, "All right, we got, so and so in the red, so and so in the blue. On your mark and set, go." They'd have to jump. They'd have to climb over a rail, run up the steps. Then they'd get to that. There's another level that goes from the 600 level, 700 level. They'd have to jump that rail and then run all the way up to the top. And it would take about a minute. And the fans would, root on the red guy or the blue guy. So we did this for a while. It was pretty popular. And we said, after a while, we're like, we got to change things up. This is getting a little stale. So we're like, what can we do? And this is when rollerblading was big. So I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we have a rollerblade race from one foul pole to the other foul pole? And the concrete, if you remember up, it's basically below the 600, 700 level. The concrete was not that wide. It was probably about, 10 feet wide. So there wasn't really a room to do a race, but you could fix it where one guy would get in the lead, and then the other guy, you'd have to almost pass it and kind of go back and forth. But the problem is there's a little bit of a stair would jut out every so often. And so that would make it from a 10 feet to about 7 feet, right? So we're deciding who's going to do it. And nobody in the meeting, all the young people couldn't come up with anybody. I said, you know what? I grew up playing ice hockey, and I've got rollerblades. I'll be the one guy. I will find the second person. So I called my brother Dollar Bill. Now, I used this expression earlier, but this truly, and Crowley, you can attest to this. He is a definition of the wheel is spinning, but the hamster is dead. He's a little
no doubt about it.
Yes, he is. He's different. So I called Dollar Bill, who also grew up playing ice hockey, and I said, Dollar, have you ever been on rollerblades? He said, no. He said, why? I said, well, we're playing the Yankees. We're going to probably have 35,000 people, and I need a competitor in this rollerblade thing. He goes, well, I can skate. Just get me a pair of rollerblades, and I'll do it. So I got him a pair of rollerblades. He didn't practice. He had never been on rollerblades before. So we get up there, and next thing you know, Dan Baker says, go. Again, in front of 35,000 people. So Billy gets off to a start, and he's flying. Well, the problem is he's kind of his skates are kicking out. He's trying to go too fast. And he doesn't realize that there's these stairs that are about to jut out. They're going to make it from a 10 feet to a 7 feet. Well, I'm behind him. His right foot slams the stair. Oh. He goes into a spin. Luckily, he's wearing a helmet. Sparks are coming from his head on the concrete as he's doing a breakdance move. I've got to jump over him. The fans are booing him. I'm laughing. I'm hot dogging now because I know I'm going to win. I'm laughing too. So I'm going backwards. I'm high-fiving. I'm putting my hands up like I'm high-fiving people. Meanwhile, Dollar Bill gets up. He's a puddle. He's got blood from waist
to
foot.
Goodness.
And he spent the next 6 innings in the infirmary. Yeah, and that was
Thanks,
the end
bro.
of the rollerblade race.
Hey, Richie, I want to make sure we get to some more current Philly stuff. We got about 20 minutes left, so just to plan that accordingly.
Thanks for the heads up. We have to do the heads up when we are doing social distancing here. So, Braze, you can't make this stuff up, right? Moving on to more updated stuff. Now, you guys had 1 month of spring training down in Clearwater, and then obviously, the big shutdown. So, 2-part question. First, what did the Phillies look like? How are they looking? Bryce Harper's second year. You got, guys coming together now who went through A
New
transition period
manager.
and adjustment last year. What's that?
New manager.
We'll get that's going to be another question.
Yeah.
But how was the team looking? And then how do you see? I know MLB is going to lead the way on what the rules are with trying to come out of coronavirus lockdown. But how did the team look? What was exciting? And then how do you see this lockdown affecting them and maybe the entire season?
All right, so some are going to be a little difficult because it's there's so much speculation out there. But I was down in spring training. I think everybody was really, really excited about this season. If you remember, Bryce Harper joined the team last year fairly deep into spring training, and he was just getting adjusted. Had to get to know everybody in the organization, the trainers, the strength conditioning coach and the coaches and the PR people. So I think there was such an adjustment for him. And I think he still, to me, in my opinion, I think he exceeded expectations. His defense was a question mark, but not last year. Last year, his defense was phenomenal. He bonded right away with the fans. He wearing the Fanatic shoes right in the get-go. I think he's ready for a monster season when the season, hopefully does begin. So I think you add Bryce Harper. You take basically Didi Gregorius, who's on a one-year deal, who is now fully recovered from his Tommy John surgery. Didi Gregorius, who seamlessly took over when Derek Jeter, retired. That's a tough position to be the one to replace Derek Jeter, and he did it in the biggest market and the biggest spotlight. So I think that would have been a huge, that would have been a good upgrade. I mean, Segura was a good shortstop last year, but you put Segura, basically they were trying to get him at third base, and he was comfortable in spring training at third base, which then would allow Scott Kingery to play his more natural position at second base. In the outfield, you would have, and the good news about starting, what could be about starting late is that Andrew McCutchen, who, as you remember, got hurt, ACL, he wasn't going to be ready if the season started in March, which is March 26th. But whenever the season resumes, he will be ready. So to have
that's a great point.
So to have Andrew McCutchen at left field, and then you've got obviously a Bryce Harper at right, and then the center would be a combination of Roman Quinn and Adam Hazley, who performed well in his last 2 months last year. And then you also have Jay Bruce. So your outfield is pretty good, especially when you're looking at a healthy Andrew McCutchen. You got JT Realmuto as your catcher, who's now had 1 year under his belt and was arguably the best catcher in the league. Right. So then it gets to pitching. So Aaron Nola is a given, and what we lacked was someone to compete with him as the ace. As Jake Arrieta is kind of on the downside of his career, but still, he was battling a little bit of injuries too. So, and he's on the last year of his contract. So you got the last year of Jake on his contract. You got Aaron Nola, and now you bring in Zach Wheeler, who is a guy that everyone's saying could really take that next step. He's got the 98-mile-per-hour fastball. He's got 4 or 5 pitches. He's got all the ingredients, and he's shown big-time flashes. And people are thinking he could be the next pitcher to take the next great step. And then you've got you got Zach Eflin probably as your 4, and then you've got Vinny Velasquez and others competing for that 5th spot. Some younger pitchers, Ranger Suarez, and maybe some other guys. And your bullpen is pretty much the guy you're getting the injured guys back from last year, which would be Adam Morgan. You're getting back. Robertson probably won't be ready until later this summer, but hopefully he'll be back. So that'll be a big jolt for us. And again, you got another year in Hector Neris and a bunch of other guys. So I think people are very, very excited. And also what happens during this offseason, Syndergaard went down, who had Tommy John surgery. So, that's a big bullet taken out of the Mets. And then you look at the Braves. Braves lost Donaldson, which is a big part. So, but they still have a great young lineup. And the Nationals, they lost their third baseman, who was one of the top players in the league last year. But so I was very excited about in spring training.
Now, since everybody's in the same boat, we all know baseball, right? It's just, a quarter inch of timing either way, whether it's pitching, hitting, all the above, makes huge difference. So everyone's in the same boat as far as this negatively impacting their timing and they're going to be rusty. But is it possible that the delay of the season could help the Phillies more than other teams based on the injuries?
I do, because I think you had Jake was even a little hurt. I think he tweaked his back on his last start. So you got, again, McCutchen you saw how valuable he was to the team last year when he was playing. So to get McCutchen back, to get Adam Morgan fully healthy, to get Tommy Hunter, who would have started on the DL if we had started March 26th, he's another valuable part of the bullpen. To get everyone healthy, I think would be immense. But I'm sure that's probably the case for other teams. I just don't know the other teams as well and their injuries, that they are dealing with.
Well, we know the Astros are going to have some injuries with everyone throwing at them.
That's a great reminder, Weave. So, Ray, what's the league's take? I mean, obviously, if somebody lost an MVP or the World Series, they're going to have more bitterness towards the Astros. But what's the general thought? Is it going to be forgotten pretty quickly, or are there going to be a lot of bean balls coming down the pike?
I don't know about the bean balls. I know people probably, especially the players, probably won't forget in whatever form that takes. And I'm sure some of the fans, especially in the division, that the Astros are in, when they're playing their rivals, they're going to hear about it. That's not going to go away. I don't know if you're really going to see the beaning. I think you're going to see more just, you're going to see other teams pretty pumped up to play against the Astros. That's for sure. And the Red Sox.
I thought in some of the early spring training games, though, some pitchers were throwing at them. Is that not the case?
Yeah, I think it might have happened a couple of times, and there was a warning, and I think the commissioner got involved. Hopefully that's passed. I hope that doesn't become part of it. I think you're just going to see a lot of intensity from the players, a lot of mouthing off, a lot of scrutiny on the whole organization, as they probably should be.
Do you think they got what they deserved? Or do you think the punishment should have been more players?
Well, it's tough because I think the commissioner had to get in order to get cooperation from the players, he had to give them immunity. So, it's tough to punish the players if you couldn't have had an investigation if you didn't have, players coming out and saying what they did, and they wouldn't say what they did if they didn't have immunity.
Right.
So, so some people thought it's soft. I mean, I know a lot of the players came out when it came down, and some of the players weren't very happy, but but also there's certain guys, A.J. Hinch and others, that lost their job. So
right.
It's pretty heavy price for some of those guys, the GM, Ludenow and A.J. Hinch.
Now, Brage, we actually did a Are We Idiots episode on the topic of gut versus analytics. And a person's name came up during that episode, Gabe Kapler, who I know you have a very good relationship with.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to ask any questions that, put you on one side of the fence there. But moving forward, a lot of people are excited about Girardi coming in. How would you compare the two managers, and what do you see as the major differences that could impact the team this year?
Well, I think, obviously Gabe had never managed before in the major leagues. So I think he learned right away. I mean, that first game when he pulled Aaron Nola in the opener, and we blew the lead, I think he kind of, and I think Gabe, to his credit, did, because, was very numbers oriented. Then he started getting less and less numbers oriented as he got to know the players and trusted the players. But, no doubt he was still definitely very sabermetrically oriented. Now, Joe Girardi is a guy that's managed before. Obviously, he managed in New York. He's a guy that was a catcher, which gives, to me, an advantage as a manager because you're really the coach on the field when you're playing. So, again, playing in big markets like Chicago and New York, managing in New York, and winning a World Series against us, I think it's going to give him – I think obviously I haven't seen him manage a game with the Phillies yet other than spring training, but I think you're going to get that classic balance, more balance, where it's going to be more gut and more analytics. And I think he said it, look, you got to look at the data, but you don't have to use the data as a tool, but it shouldn't be the panacea. It shouldn't be everything. You should be, knowing your players. You should know the numbers. You should know your gut. You should just, and use that combination to make the best decision.
Yeah, we also covered, guys that do more analytics than gut, more gut than analytics. And we our conclusion was you got to use both, right? You have to have a feel for the game. You have to have a feel for who's hot, who's not. You can't just go, oh, well, so-and-so lefty versus lefty, 92% of the time in this situation, it may not matter when the game's on the line. So it'll be interesting to see how, Kapler was a real players manager and had really tight bonds with the players. Is Girardi the same way?
And Gabe was really good with the organization. I mean, there was some people that were really bummed, not from a baseball sense, but just from a human sense of dealing with him. I mean, he was great to me. Joe Girardi, I tell you what, guys, he is going to be loved in this town. I mean, I've seen small glimpses of where he just gets it. You know what I mean? He's one of these guys, very smart. He obviously went to Northwestern. Again, it's from a baseball perspective, being a catcher. He is a guy, put it this way, we had back in January, we have a dinner, a banquet every year where we do it in our Diamond Club. We host all of our Phillies it's Phillies Charities, which is our charity. So what we do is in January, we disperse grants that are small grants, but grants that are very meaningful to a lot of organizations in the Philly area. And we have a dinner where we bring all the recipients of the grants to the Diamond Club, and we honor all the people. We get, different charities get up and tell their story, and it's a really nice evening. Joe Girardi was there, but I think he just thought he was going to get up there, because he asked our community relations person, "Do you want me to just, do you want to just get up there and talk about, that I'm excited to be, manage the team and talk about the team?" And she said that'd be great. So he gets up there. The next thing you know, 15 minutes later, he had everyone in the room crying. He was talking about how when he was a player, his mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and he went through the whole, traumatic ordeal, and literally there was not a dry eye in the house. And then he came back and got everyone pumped up. And I literally turned, whoever was next to me, I said, "Oh my God, this guy is just too good to be true." He's blue collar, he's eloquent, he's smart, he's got tons of experience from a player and managerial perspective. So I'm excited to see what he can do when the season starts.
And when he has to be no nonsense, he's no nonsense too, which I think will endear him to the Philly fans.
Oh yeah, yes, totally. You can totally tell he's tough. But
yeah, this is great to hear. I mean, there's a lot of disappointment in Philadelphia with no sports. I mean, March Madness was painful for me, but the Flyers were starting to play really well, and teams thought they could vie for the Stanley Cup. So I know a lot of folks are looking forward to the Philly season. Now, on a sensitive note, right? A lot of news came out in the last 2 weeks about Roy Halladay and all the substances that were in his system. When his plane went down. Did you, when you were around him, back in the, I guess going back 10 years now? Did you notice anything with his personality, any depression, any quirkiness, any addictions or anything?
Not at all. I mean, I honestly, I gotta say, I really didn't know Roy. Roy was, he was so focused. He didn't, on game days or just even non-game days, his routine, he would get to the ballpark on spring training at literally 5 a.m. And whether it's spring training or during the season, if you went in the locker room, he's not one of these guys you can small talk. Not that he was a bad guy. In fact, he was totally opposite. He was an awesome guy, but he was so focused and driven, and he had such a routine that I don't think really anybody knew him. I'm sure the trainer and the coaches and his teammates got, to a good degree, but he was just so focused. And so it wasn't until after the season or after he retired, one of the first events, we had an event at the Diamond Club where we had some alumni, and it was one of these things where he took questions from Tom McCarthy and then the audience. And I'd never seen the side of him where he was joking, he was laughing, he was telling great stories. And I remember turning to somebody going, "Oh my God, that's totally different from the Roy Halladay I knew, who was so intense and and focused." And I think that's why he's one of the greatest pitchers to ever wear a Phillies uniform, and why he's in the Hall of Fame, because he was that driven. So I along a lot of other people didn't know Roy. I knew his wife much better. But
tragedy.
It's very sad. It's very tragic. It's a huge loss for everybody.
No doubt about it. Now, I know we're getting, how much time we have here?
About 5 minutes, and I definitely want to ask Brage about his opinion on will we have baseball without fans to start? Is that where we're heading? Do you think that's where it's likely?
You know what? I'm just like you guys. No idea. Just trying to follow as much as I can, read as much as I can. Um, and I know that the league itself, every league, is trying to figure out what the CDC is saying, what the federal government, what the state governments. I know that there was some optimism, according to Jeff Passan in the on ESPN. He had a recent article talking about how that they're trying to work things. Major League Baseball is trying to work things out, but there's just so much up in the air.
Right.
They're saying that some of the states that have basically opened up a little bit. I know Texas, Florida, Arizona, Minnesota. I'm hearing that there's talk of where it could be. It could be in. There was talk about, could it be in Arizona? Every team go to Arizona and play there and basically just do all the games there, because there's all these stadiums around each other. Then I heard, well, it could be Florida and Arizona. Maybe you have like the Cactus League, and then you have the Grapefruit League, and you have them do something like that. And then I'm hearing there could be little, like, I don't know what you call them, pods or areas where, you have teams that are playing in Minnesota, teams that are playing in Texas, some of these states where that's more open up. But there's so many questions about testing and, and how are the players going to be quarantined from their family once the season starts?
Yeah.
What do you do is if the Major League Baseball has the testing, but, some of the hospitals in other states don't have the testing. I know one of the leagues was talking, I forget, somewhere in Europe, they were talking about for every test that they're going to have, they'll donate 5 tests to the general public to use. So, but there's so many questions and variables. I know that, a lot of the teams have paid their employees through May. And I know that the players they have a deal that was cut as far as them being paid through May. Again, that was just negotiated not too long ago. So I know that there's an incentive for the players to get the season started, but they've got to do it as safely as possible. You don't want to be like the NBA, where the NBA didn't know, nobody knew. But you remember all of a sudden they were playing, and then was Donovan Mitchell, one of the players,
Rudy Gobert.
Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
Next they had to shut it down. So we have a lot of lessons to be learned, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know that's out there in the future. So, I don't think Rob Manfred could tell you.
Right.
They can hopefully be optimistic, but it would be great, as you guys said earlier. It would be great to have sports, because right now, the closest thing we have to sports is the NFL draft and The Last Dance on ESPN. Going back and watching, Michael Jordan footage. So it'd be nice to get great live competition going again.
Amen to that. I don't know if you saw, but the NFL draft ratings were up 40%. People were so starved for something live.
Oh, my whole family watched, and they normally don't watch the draft, so it was great.
So, Richie, we have a couple minutes. You have one final question before we adjourn?
I was going to say, Brage, real quick. You have a great relationship with the radio stations, and I remember, I guess it's 25. Is it 25 years when you were doing the Dial-A-Date on WIOQ, and you wrote my butt into it? How did that all come about?
Okay, that was actually on Y100, and it was a guy named Barsky. If you remember
Barsky.
Barsky.
Yeah, now I remember. Yep.
It was a very popular show on Y100. And so every Friday they would have Blind Datorama. And it would be on the phone, and it would be a bachelor, much like the dating game. Remember back in the 70s, you'd have a bachelor and 3 bachelorettes, or you'd have a bachelorette and 3 bachelors. And so they would get these people on, and, I was on their show a lot. So one day I was in the studio, and they said, "Hey, we don't have anybody for our Blind Datorama, the next day. Do you have anybody that can do it?" And here I'm in my 20s, so I got a lot of friends that have very large personalities, like our man Crawler, and a lot of our other friends. And I said, you know what? I got a lot of, I can do it. So I think I put my brother on one show. He was out of control, and everyone loved him. So they said, "You got anybody else?" So it got to the point where this guy Shemp, who was a producer, kept calling me every week and saying, "Hey, you got anybody else?" I mean, there was one time I put 3 of my buddies on there, and they all knew they were competing against each other, and they were killing each other on the show. And it literally would make my drive into work on Friday mornings because just knowing that my, a lot of my friends were going to be competing, against each other with egos on a dating show on the radio made for good entertainment.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I remember the one question I got, the girl said, so if any one of you could spend a day as a woman, what would be the most interesting thing for you to experience? And the two other guys gave these really boring answers. And I said, I get really tired when I have to pee. I'd love to spend a whole day peeing sitting down. And she actually chose me. I never met her, but she actually chose me. Hey, real quick, so I know we're running out of time. Brage, give us a quick plug on your Phillies podcast, because I've listened to a couple of them and they're really good.
Yep, you can. We're unlike you guys. We've kind of been quarantined, so to speak. But we just we recorded one with Aaron Rowan yesterday, so we're hoping to get that one up. But it's Backstage with Burgoyne and Brage. You can find it on iTunes, or you can go on the Phillies website under podcasts and find it. It's Tom Burgoyne, who is the best friend of the Fanatic, the very best friend of the Fanatic, and myself. And so we are the same age. I've known him for 27 years. He's probably my best friend in the organization. So we know each other really well. We have all the stories. So we literally have guests on just so we have an excuse to tell the stories about the guests. And so it's very silly. So again, Backstage with Burgoyne and Brage. We actually had our podcast picture up on the wall of the Palm. But unfortunately, I think we brought the Palm down because about 3 months after being on the wall, the Palm went out of business, unfortunately.
Oh boy. Well, John, thanks for being on our show, and to our listeners out there, please go out and listen and check out John's podcast. And as we adjourn, we're going to talk about COVID-19 and related things on the next episode. And as always, please remember, if what you hear or say he sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.
True love won't say goodbye.